Well, it's time now for business, and let's begin as ever with a look at the markets. Firstly, how things closed up in the United States. Gains across the board on Wall Street on Thursday. The Dow Jones ending just above the flat line, the S&P 500 up almost 0.4%, and the Nasdaq ending up almost 0.9 of a percentage point, as you can see there. Well, as for Asia this Friday, the Nikkei, the only indices to be trading in negative territory right now, down about 0.5%. The Shanghai Composite up 0.1%. A similar picture for the Kospi. The Hang Seng, meanwhile, up 0.35%. Well, for more now, we can bring in Jamil Ahmad, Director of Investment Strategy at NAGA. Jamil, thanks very much for joining us this morning on France 24. Could you take us what we are seeing on the markets today?
Thank you, Hexie. So we are starting to see markets lose a little bit of momentum and steam towards the end of the week. You've got the higher infection rates and more risks of lockdown. That hasn't been helped by some of the economic data concerns as well that kind of show that the economies are losing the momentum that they were steadily building following the lockdowns being not so tight towards the summer months and coming into the autumn. But overall, if you look at how markets have performed in November so far, all the positive news on the vaccine, it was only at the beginning of this week that markets actually hit the highest levels of all-time highs to some extent based on vaccine progress. And then you had the presidential election uncertainty and everything else that's happened this month. I think investors will be overall pleased with November so far. It just happens to be that we seem to be having a more of a downbeat, cautious end of the week. But overall, things are looking pretty positive in the market picture.
And Jamil, the IMF has also given something of a downbeat assessment of the long-term impact of the pandemic. That despite, of course, a lot of good news about a COVID-19 vaccine this past week.
Absolutely, that's completely correct. For all of these analogies about light being at the end of the tunnel, and most of us are very upbeat right now because we see at least progress when it comes to developing a vaccine. The IMF did follow up on the Federal Reserve comments at the end of last week, which is the US Central Bank. And what the IMF said is that this crisis has led to a real disconnect between asset prices, which is essentially where global markets and financial markets are headed, and what's happening in the real economy. And this is something we've been speaking about ourselves over the past couple of weeks. And essentially what the IMF said is that this crisis is likely to leave unequal scars across people and their economies and their businesses, which is pretty much similar narrative, but different kind of words to what the chair of the US Federal Reserve, again, the Central Bank of the United States, said at the end of last week, where he said that, you know what, there's going to be many businesses, many people that are going to continuously need support for a long time after this pandemic. So it's food for thought. At the same time, with all of this light at the end of the tunnel, hopes that we will see as well.
And Jamil, you've also been following some rather important decisions on rates changes in a couple of key emerging markets.
Absolutely. So we had both Turkey and we had South Africa that released their latest interest rate decisions just yesterday. Now, South Africa left interest rates unchanged, but the most fascinating story right now is actually what's happening in Turkey, the Turkish lira and the Turkey interest rate story. So basically, interest rates in Turkey increased by 4.75% yesterday, which is the biggest rate increase in more than 2 years. And essentially, we've been speaking about this over the past couple of weeks. You had the Turkish lira that repeatedly was hitting all-time lows against the US dollar over the autumn and over this year, pretty much overall, based on a number of different factors. But over the last 2 weeks, we've had the central bank governor of the Republic Bank of Turkey dismissed. You had then the unexpected resignation of the Turkish finance minister. And now you had this interest rate decision yesterday. In the span of 2 weeks, we've gone from the Turkish lira being as low as 8.57 against the US dollar to actually, as of yesterday, trading just below 750. So there's remarkable changes in the complex here of what has been one of the most volatile and fascinating currencies to watch throughout this pandemic and throughout 2020 overall this year.
Jamil Ahmad, Director of Investment Strategy at NAGA, thank you very much indeed.